Sup everybody, this is Action Jax, your fearless navigator to the infinite depths of entertainment and pop culture. Thanks for joining me here today on another episode of Wet Paint, the brutally honest review show that discusses new movies, television shows, anime, and more. Today I'm here to discuss the new DCEU film, The Suicide Squad. So let's get to it. The Suicide Squad is written and directed by James Gunn and produced by DC Films, Atlas Entertainment, and Safran Company. A standalone sequel to Suicide Squad 2016, it stars Margot Robbie, Idris Elba, John Cena, Joel Kinnaman, Sylvester Stallone, Viola Davis, Jai Courtney, and Peter Capaldi. When a military coup led by the charismatic Silvio Luna takes control of the small island nation of Corto Maltese, a task force of dangerous convicts are enlisted into the Suicide Squad. Their mission is to infiltrate and destroy a Nazi-era laboratory run by their hyper-intelligent head scientist, the Thinker, and any evidence of the dangerous alien housed inside, aptly named Starro the Conqueror. The major ensemble characters involved in the Suicide Squad are Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis, Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, Bloodsport, played by Idris Elba, Peacemaker, played by John Cena, Colonel Rick Flag, played by Joel Kinnaman, King Shark, voiced by Sylvester Stallone, Ratcatcher 2, played by Daniela Melchior, Polka Dot Man, played by David Dastmalchian, and The Thinker, played by Peter Capaldi. Before we get into the review, I want to quickly preface that this video will be filled with major spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film, proceed at your own caution. So enough of that, let's talk about The Suicide Squad. And this was a really fun movie. It has heart, it has humor, it has tons of gore, and a lot of little random moments throughout the film that elevate the entire story and elevate the entire film. Now going into this, I wasn't particularly excited. After seeing the trailers a few months ago, it kind of looked generic, but I did have hope that James Gunn was going to be able to pull this off. I have to admit I was a little surprised that he wanted to do Suicide Squad, especially a remake and or a reboot. Okay, so putting that aside, I really just want to start off by talking about some of the directing, the cinematography, and the editing. So first off, I don't think anyone can deny that James Gunn is a pretty solid director. When it came to the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, I personally loved those movies. It really just had everything that you wanted in a big budget superhero movie. But it has these little moments that really shine, and I think that's where James Gunn is at his best. Yes, he can do the large spectacle stuff, but it's these tiny little moments of character that I think he excels at. And there's a few characters in this film that have these wonderful little moments, and it's like their likability goes through the roof. I think James Gunn did a really good job here, giving the entire story a certain style, where at first I was a little nervous about it, thinking it might be a little generic. It was a surprisingly unique looking film, and I hope that James Gunn had a lot of fun making this movie, because you can feel like there's a lot of fun in this movie. So when it comes to the cinematography, I think it's pretty darn solid here. I think there's a couple of really interesting shots. It's not gonna blow you away, but it's very consistent and it has a certain look to it, and I think that the framing and the execution is quite good. I think it could have benefited by being like 35mm, for example, rather than being digital. However, that's a very small nitpick. Overall, I think that the cinematography lends well to James Gunn's directing, so I think they did a pretty good job here. Another standout when it comes to the production side was the editing. The editing itself maybe not as stylized as the first Suicide Squad. I think it does a much better job of bringing across little moments with the characters, and also the action sequences themselves seem to move along at what I would consider a much better pace. So when it comes to the directing, cinematography, and the editing, I think overall they did a great job. So next up I want to talk about the music. I think that you're going to end up getting a lot of people who say that the first Suicide Squad had a much better soundtrack than this one, but I feel like they're two different movies. And when it comes to music, you have to figure out what kind of music is going to go with the kind of movie that you're going to make. And while I might tend to agree that the literal soundtrack was better in 2016 Suicide Squad, I think that the movie did a better job here expressing the kind of emotion and action and overall feeling that you were trying to get from the scene itself. Suicide Squad 2016 might as well be a music video, okay? So if you're saying literally the other music in that film was better, yes. I mean, they had like Queen, for God's sake. I understand where people are coming from, but I have to disagree when it comes to the tone of the film and how the music was used. I think this movie does a much better job. It was never distracting. When it comes to the music, overall, I was pretty happy with it. Sound effects were great. I really liked the sounds of like the guns. Starro the Conqueror had this really awesome rumbling, screeching sound that came from it. The soundscape, the entire audio spectrum that was being covered here was great. Okay, so putting a lot of the production stuff aside, let's talk about the acting. There are a lot of standouts here. My favorite character was Ratcatcher 2. She was excellent. I did not expect that at all. She is by far the heart of this film. You know, Daniela Melchior did a wonderful job having this combination of vulnerability and strength and love and compassion. She just has some of the best little moments. Whether she's befriending King Shark or giving out her backstory, you actually feel for her character, and I loved her little rat. It was fun. Another highlight was Idris Elba, and he's just a really solid lead man here. I like his story. It wasn't overly complicated. His reactions legitimately were solid. Him playing off with Peacemaker and King Shark, Polka Dot Man, and Harley Quinn, he's kind of the anchor of this film, and he kept everybody together, and his performance really sold me on his character change at the end. Another wonderful character was King Shark. I have to say, I was not expecting that at all. I wasn't a huge fan of his design when I first saw him, but I have to admit, he's kind of this big, dumb, likable murder machine. You want to see him just have friends. That's really all he wants. And Num Num, he does eat a lot of people. There's a great little scene in the aquarium at Jotunheim near the end of the film, and he's just so happy. And you as an audience member just want to feel happy for him. And I don't think you would have gotten this kind of reaction from me if you hadn't had a couple of moments earlier on the film. One of the big ones was when they were all out at the club waiting for the Thinker to show up, and they're all having drinks and having a great time and laughing, and poor King Shark is just sitting there in the van by himself, and you actually feel bad for him. By laying the humor up front, you like him as a character, and then having some of these more emotional moments really endears you to him. I think a lot of people are gonna like King Shark for sure. Now, I don't want to minimize some of the other characters that I thought were great as well. David Dastmalchian did a wonderful job with Polka Dot Man. He doesn't have a whole lot of dialogue, but he has just like these weird little moments where you just like him as a character, and the stuff with his mom was pretty hilarious. He had his moment. You know, he was able to say that he was a superhero and he went out doing something good. Now, you got two other characters here that I think were really good as well, but for different reasons. The first one I want to throw out is Joel Kinnaman as Colonel Rick Flag, because he just does a really good job of being the audience, I feel like. He doesn't have too many quips. He doesn't have anything ridiculous going on. He is just there to do the job. And that opening scene where the Suicide Squad come in to save him is legitimately funny. And he does a really good job of playing the straight man here. I think Joel Kinnaman nailed exactly what it is you wanted from that character. You've also got, of course, John Cena playing Peacemaker. Putting aside all of the controversy around John Cena here for just a moment, I think that he did a pretty good job as Peacemaker. Probably some of the best laugh out loud moments for me in his back and forth with Bloodsport. I was surprised at how well John Cena acted his scenes. The directing when it comes to these actors was excellent, and I just keep going on about the actors because without the actors, this film does not work, because the plot itself is not going to win any awards. It's a very simple story. Get from point A to point B and destroy that thing and go home. I hadn't mentioned Viola Davis really in any capacity as Amanda Waller because she just did a great job. She was the bitch. She was truly unlikable. It was great. Luckily, every character had their moment to shine. You know, I haven't mentioned also Harley Quinn because, again, she just did a great job. I think that this is the best Harley Quinn we've gotten. Let's be clear, Birds of Prey was terrible. That movie was bad. I basically burned that out of my brain. She was extremely unlikable in that movie. Here, she has some wonderful moments. Yeah, there is a long section dedicated just to Harley Quinn, and the more I think about it, the more I realize that it's kind of pointless, but I think that she just does a really good job with the character, and you can relate to her. She is a broken character. I do want to get really quickly as well to the villains. Ultimately, they're forgettable. They're just your typical bad guys. Peter Capaldi does a great job, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't have a lot to work with. The Starro character is really interesting, but it's just a big bad kaiju monster. I think the best part was at the very end when Starro had the line that was like, "I was happy floating through space looking at the stars." That kind of recontextualized his character. You know, overall, the villains themselves, they're not gonna like blow you away. And so finally that brings me to the twists in this film, and that opening scene on the beach was a complete surprise. They spend this time at the very beginning setting up these certain characters to be part of the Suicide Squad. So you start off one of the opening scenes on the beach, and just to see that entire group of superheroes basically get slaughtered was a complete surprise. So I give props to James Gunn. I was surprised at how engaged I was in this whole movie. No matter how weird it got, and no matter how generic certain areas were, I was kind of along for the ride. The humor was solid. I had some audible, laugh out loud moments. I think a lot of the jokes landed, and I liked all the characters. Lastly, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is modern Hollywood when it comes to these types of movies. Thankfully, DC has not caught the Marvel virus, so to speak, and has not made anything yet that you could consider to be woke. Woke is like a disease, and it's been spreading from movie to movie, especially in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And usually it involves taking the male characters down a couple of pegs and raising the female characters up a couple of pegs. The male characters have to do something stupid to make the female characters look better. And this movie does not do that. It treats all of their characters with respect. They all have their own unique strengths and weaknesses. No political nonsense, no agenda. It was just a fun action romp, R-rated, and it didn't try to pander. It didn't want to try and change my mind on some socio-political issue. Just wonderful. It's like we live in an alternate reality where all of these things are now starting to become normal, and being able to just step out for a second and watch a 2-hour blood fest with swearing and fun characters and humor, it was like a breath of fresh air. So good job, DC. I think you've put together your best DCEU film to date. Now, it's not gonna blow people away, and I think you're gonna get a lot of mixed reviews when it comes to this, but hey, I think all you can ask for in this kind of movie is fun. I was entertained, and that's basically all I wanted from this film, was to be entertained. So, my final thoughts. The Suicide Squad is a fun romp. This is a character-driven story. This is not a plot-driven story, and I think that that's where James Gunn really excels as a storyteller. The visuals were great, and there were some standout moments in this film that I think I would be looking forward to watching again. I think it's worthy of entering the superhero rotation, so to speak, in my movie collection. If I had to give it a score, I would say that it was a solid 7. So before you go, I just want to say thanks to everybody watching. Your support really does help keep me going and allows me to do even more videos in the future. If you liked the video, consider leaving a like or a comment. And please subscribe for much more content. If you didn't like it, hey, I appreciate you sticking around this long, and I do hope to keep improving and making much better videos in the future. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and I will hopefully have a Patreon in the future. This is Action Jax, your fearless navigator through the infinite depths of entertainment and pop culture.